Welcome to Q&A practice. Let's get started with some warm-up. And we will start with defense attorney. Ready? Here we go. You have talked about people being in the street around the bank and north of the bank and around the bonfire. Was there any people wandering around south of the bank? As far as I know, there were just people walking around the bank all night long. You have testified that you don't know any of the people who were throwing rocks. That's true. Aside from that, roughly how many people did you encounter that evening that you know? Oh, approximately 15, I think. I am not sure. And you talked to them? Yes, I did. And they were sort of wandering around as you were? Yes, they were. Among the 15 or so that you say you knew, did any of them throw any rocks? I didn't see them throwing any rocks. Was there much foot traffic to the south of the bank? Was there people milling around on the street at various periods? Yes. Sometimes the street was clear, would you say? Sometimes, yes. You were standing across from the bank, is that correct? That's correct. At one time there was a big group of people between you and the bank? Yes. At the time, did you hear any breaking glass? I heard breaking glass for quite a long period of time. Was the crowd tightly packed or not? At times it was tight and at times it was loose. Well, could you have seen through the crowd in order to see who was pitching the rocks at the time you heard glass breaking? If they were in the street, yes. All right, now let's get to our transcript. And we will start with the plaintiff attorney. Ready? Here we go. Okay, so I guess then what you're saying is you don't know if she was impaired by medications one way or the other. Would that be accurate? Misstates testimony. It doesn't really misstate anything. Go ahead and answer. Calls for speculation, lacks foundation, assumes facts. I will say that I didn't see any signs of impairment. Did you test her in any way, officer? No. For being impaired for drugs? No. Did you perform any tests on her? I didn't. Did you have anybody perform tests on her? I didn't. I'm telling you she was under the effects of some medication. Whether it was impaired or not, we'll leave it to an expert to decide that, but I'm letting you know that I talked with her and I'm not throwing anything in to argue. She's got a very good lawyer here. What I want to know from you today is, without having tested her for impairment from medication, okay, and a woman who you mentioned was upset, and without having anybody else test her for impairment for medications, would it be a fair and accurate comment that you really, as you sit here today, don't know if she was impaired from any medications? Is that calls for speculation? You got to let me finish. Would that be fair and accurate? Calls for speculation, lacks foundation. No, no is the best answer I can give you. No, it's not fair and accurate. No. Did you know that she was impaired? Objection, lacks foundation. You may answer. Assumes facts, calls for speculation. It's no. If somebody else knew at the time, I'm only asking about you. Did you know if she was impaired? I don't. Do not believe she was impaired. I'm not asking for your belief right now. I may in a minute, but what I want to know is, as a matter of certainty, do you know if she was impaired by drugs or medication? Same objections. No. If we go on to page 3 goes on. Evidently what you did here, you documented that Sam Banks was transported by Russells, correct? And were you present when they actually picked his body up? Yes. And you mentioned that when you got to the scene, I know you didn't know if he'd been moved or not. Did you see where he was at the scene of the accident? Yes, I saw where he was laying. Okay. Can you describe for me as best you can? Was he in the intersection area? Yes. And if we Crestview runs generally east and west, is that right? Correct. There may be some kilt or two, but for today's purposes, we're going to consider Crestview going east and west, and Spring Road kind of a T intersects into Crestview, correct? Correct. You know what I mean by the term prolongation? Yes. Okay, if we wanted to, I want to find out where in the intersection you saw his body, how far to the west of the prolongation of the west line of Spring Road would his body have been. I would put his body at approximately 2 feet west of Spring Road. 2 feet east of the west prolongation line. Okay, so he was actually, before you get into the intersection, so it would be in the intersection but not quite past the prolongation line, the west prolongation line of Spring Road. Okay, just for my notes, the west prolongation, these people were westbound, correct? Correct. And so what you have is you have him to the east of the west prolongation, correct? About 2 feet east, about 2 feet to the east, correct? Okay, and do you know from the southern point of Crestview, by the way, there's a white, we have the photos, we'll mark in a second. Okay, there's a white fog line. Do you call that a fog line or edge line? What do you call? It's the painted white edge line, road edge line. Do you know how far, as you recall, how far to the north of that white line his body was? If you remember, I would say approximately 4 feet south. It would be south of the north road edge. It was, because they're headed west, so the top of your page from my perspective would be north, right? Well, I'm making my notes and we're just talking orally. What you're saying is we have a prolongation along the north edge of Crestview. Okay, then that fog line, then his body would be about 4 feet to the south of that prolongation. Well, the prolongation line there would be the south road edge of Crestview, so it would be the south prolongation of Crestview Highway. Well, it's because you're looking at it from the north. I'm sorry, you're right. Okay, so it would be the south, correct. So you're saying from the southerly south prolongation, he would have been north about 4 feet or so. Well, I'm saying from the north road edge, which will be the one at the top of your page, I would put his head approximately 4 to 6 feet south of that line. Let's try some different material. And this is a continuation of the warm-up we did. So we will start with the defense attorney. Ready? Here we go. Although you heard glass breaking, you didn't see anyone pitching a stone. I would see arms go up and rocks let loose. You could see that? Yes, I could. Were you able to see who these people were? I tried not to. Why not? That's a very hard question to answer. I didn't want to assist the police in putting anyone in jail. It's that simple. I have been in jail myself and I just can't see it. You were saying that at a certain time you did hear glass breaking, and you say that you saw arms raised throwing stones at the glass, but you avoided seeing who was doing this. At times I did see the people who were throwing them, but I didn't know them. I had never seen them before. I just moved in this community. If it were someone you did know, could you have seen him at all times if I had been keeping an eye on him? Well, not if you had been keeping an eye on him, just simply in the course of standing there. Would you have been able to identify everyone who threw an object at the time that the glass was breaking? Would you restate your question, please? Well, were there times when glass was being broken that you didn't see someone throwing an object? Yes, quite a few times. Quite a few times. I would hear the sound of glass breaking and I would turn around and there would be a broken window. Of course, I hadn't seen who had thrown the stone. You say you would have no hesitancy about identifying David Albright in this proceeding because it is an informal proceeding. Is that correct? Yes. You know this proceeding could result in the termination of Dr. Albright? Yes, I know. All right, let's get back to our transcript. And we will start with the plaintiff attorney. Ready? Here we go. Okay, this is west, this is south. Here, let's do it like this. Maybe it will help us. This is not to scale. I'm just trying to use something here to help me. You understood that these, strike that. You understood that Mr. Banks was going westerly, right? Correct. And when coming from the east headed to the west, yes. And then this would be south and this would be north, correct? Yes. And you said that if we took the prolongation, he was about 2 feet east of the westerly prolongation, correct? Put a dotted line, so I'm just going to put 2 feet here like this, just so I know it's not to scale, okay? And then from the south, I'm sorry, if we put another prolongation at it would be the south prolongation of Crestview. Yes, I'm not a map maker here, but I'm doing okay. If we took and we went from the south prolongation of Crestview and we worked our way to the north, yes, okay. How far would that be if you know? I would say approximately maybe 14 to 18 feet north of, and I'm just going to put this arrow like this, correct, okay. Just ensuring that's property to scale then, or it's not to scale, but my point for his head would have been over that double yellow line. It would have been just north of the double yellow line. Head north just because of the road widths at that point. And this I'm going to label as, what am I at now? 13. All right, and by the way, using exhibit 13, where if you would help me understand where was the motorcycle when you first got there, I'm not sure exactly the position, but it was on the north road at the north shoulder of Crestview Highway. And that will conclude our Q&A practice.